They stole the wrong Apache woman. By sunrise, a legendary gunslinger was already at the fence. Hello everyone. Before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It's quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now, let's dive into today's story. It was a quiet evening in the rugged wilderness of the American West. The sun had just dipped behind the mountains, casting long shadows over the barren land. The air was thick with the scent of sagebrush, and the sound of the wind whistling through the trees was the only noise for miles. But, hidden in the shadows, a group of men had plans to shatter that peace. The Apache woman, a symbol of strength and resilience, had been taken against her will. Her captors, a band of ruthless criminals, had no idea who they were dealing with. They thought she was just another victim, an easy target. But they were wrong. They had stolen the wrong woman. Her name was Aiyana, and she was no ordinary Apache woman. Born into a tribe known for their fierce warriors and wisdom, Aiyana had been raised with a deep connection to the land, to the spirits, and to the traditions of her people. She had witnessed the cruelty of settlers before, seen the violence that came with the expansion of the frontier, but she had never been one to back down. Her father had always told her, "The land is sacred, and so are you. No one can take that from you unless you let them." As the men tied her to a tree in their camp, they laughed, oblivious to the power she held within. They underestimated her, and that would be their fatal mistake. They had made one error, and it would cost them dearly. Aiyana's tribe was not far, and they would come for her. But more importantly, a man, a legendary gunslinger, was already on his way. His name was Colt McAllister, and he was a man with a reputation that struck fear into the hearts of outlaws across the West. Colt was no stranger to danger. He had lived a life on the run, dealing with criminals and outlaws, but he had never forgotten the people who had helped him in his darkest hours. When he heard about Aiyana's capture, something stirred inside him. He couldn't let this go. Colt wasn't a man of many words, but his actions spoke louder than any promise. By sunrise, he would be at the fence, ready to bring justice to the wrongdoers who thought they could take what didn't belong to them. The outlaw camp was still, the fire crackling softly in the night, and the men drank, unaware that the winds were changing. By the time the first light of dawn touched the earth, the man they had heard about only in rumors would be standing before them, his gunmetal eyes cold as the steel he carried at his side. But would he arrive in time? Would Aiyana's courage hold strong? Or would the men who had taken her break her spirit before justice could be served? The stage was set for a confrontation that would shake the foundations of their world. Stay tuned as we unravel this epic tale of revenge, honor, and the unyielding spirit of the Apache people. The campfire crackled as the men drank and laughed, oblivious to the storm that was about to descend upon them. Aiyana, bound and bruised, sat against the rough bark of a tree, her head bowed in quiet defiance. The ropes that bound her wrists dug into her skin, but she didn't flinch. In her mind, she was already free. She had survived worse than this, and she wasn't about to let a bunch of outlaws determine her fate. They could think they had broken her, but they hadn't. They had underestimated her spirit. The night air was cold, but Aiyana could feel the warmth of her people's presence in her heart. They would come for her. She knew it, and Colt McAllister would be there too. Somewhere in the distance, the sound of hooves could be heard, but it was not the outlaws' horses. It was something else. It was Colt. By now, Colt McAllister had already crossed many miles, heading straight into the heart of danger. The sun had not yet risen, but he had no time to waste. A man like him didn't need sleep. He had one job now, to make sure Aiyana was safe and to bring justice to the men who thought they could take what didn't belong to them. Colt's reputation had spread like wildfire across the frontier. He had faced countless outlaws, and his guns were as fast as lightning. But it wasn't just his skills with a gun that made him legendary. It was his unwavering sense of justice. When Colt heard about Aiyana's capture, something inside him snapped. He wasn't going to let this go. Not this time. His mind was set. By the time the first rays of sunlight broke through the horizon, Colt was already at the edge of the outlaw camp. The men were too busy celebrating their supposed victory to notice him creeping closer, the sound of his horse's hooves muffled by the soft ground. Colt dismounted silently, his boots barely making a sound on the earth beneath him. He surveyed the camp, watching the men drink and laugh, completely unaware that death was only moments away. His hand moved instinctively to his holster, his fingers grazing the smooth handle of his revolver. He was ready, but he wasn't just here to shoot. He was here to teach these men a lesson they would never forget. Colt had seen too much bloodshed in his life. He was no stranger to violence, but that didn't mean he enjoyed it. He had learned long ago that justice wasn't always about bloodshed. It was about making sure the right thing was done. And right now, the right thing was freeing Aiyana and making sure these men paid for what they had done. He spotted her then, sitting by the tree, her head down. His heart tightened at the sight of her, bound and vulnerable, but her eyes held the fire of a warrior. Aiyana was no ordinary woman. She was fierce, and she had survived. Colt moved quickly, his steps quiet but deliberate. The men were still distracted, laughing loudly as they drank their whiskey. They never saw him coming. Colt approached Aiyana, his voice a low whisper, just for her. "We're getting out of here," he said. Aiyana's eyes snapped up, locking onto his with a mixture of relief and determination. She didn't speak, but her eyes said it all. She trusted him. Colt quickly cut the ropes binding her hands. The moment she was free, she stood up, her body moving with the grace of someone who had fought her way through life. But before they could leave, Colt knew the men would realize something was wrong. They would come looking for them. The time to act was now. He grabbed Aiyana's arm and pulled her into the shadows, just as the first of the outlaws turned around, his drunken gaze locking onto the empty space where she had been. "Where is she?" one of the men shouted. Colt didn't waste time. He moved fast, taking down the first man with a well-placed shot to the leg, making sure he wouldn't be able to chase them. The sound of gunfire broke the stillness of the night, and chaos erupted. The other outlaws scrambled to grab their guns, but they were too slow. Colt was already on them. His revolver flashed, and two more men dropped to the ground, one by one. Aiyana watched, her heart pounding, but she knew better than to question Colt's method. He was here to save her, and that's all that mattered. But as more men came running toward them, Colt knew they couldn't stay here forever. They had to move. "Get on my horse," Colt commanded, his voice firm. Aiyana didn't hesitate. She climbed onto the horse behind him, and with a swift kick of the reins, Colt spurred the horse forward. The sound of hooves pounding against the earth was deafening now, but Colt didn't stop. He wasn't running away. He was making sure the outlaws knew they had messed with the wrong people. The wind whipped through his hair as they rode, the first light of dawn just beginning to touch the landscape. Colt's eyes were focused, his hands steady on the reins, but he knew they had only a short time before the outlaws would catch up. Aiyana clung to him, her heart racing, but she had no fear. This was it. The moment for justice had arrived. The sound of galloping hooves echoed through the canyon as Colt McAllister and Aiyana raced towards safety. The outlaws, enraged and determined, were hot on their trail, but Colt's legendary skill with a horse and his keen instincts kept them ahead. The wind whipped through Aiyana's hair as she clung to Colt's back, her heart pounding not only from the adrenaline, but from the strange sense of trust she felt toward him. She had only known him for a short time, yet it felt like he had always been there, guiding her toward freedom. Aiyana had been through so much in her life, but this moment was different. She wasn't running anymore. She was fighting. The outlaws would pay for what they had done to her and to her people. Colt's eyes were sharp, scanning the land ahead for any sign of their pursuers. The canyon walls rose on both sides, steep and jagged, leaving them with little room to maneuver. He knew they couldn't outrun them forever. The terrain was unfamiliar to Colt, but he had been in worse situations. He had always managed to find a way out, and this time would be no different. As the sun began to rise, the first rays of light illuminated the dusty trail behind them, casting long shadows over the rocks. Colt's heart skipped a beat when he heard the sound of approaching riders. It was no longer just the outlaws chasing them. Colt had expected it, but the sight of them now brought a sense of finality. They had crossed a line. The outlaws weren't just after Aiyana anymore. They were after him too. Aiyana tightened her grip around Colt's waist, her fingers digging into his leather coat. She could sense his tension, and it made her anxious. This wasn't just a rescue anymore. It was a fight for survival. Colt knew they couldn't keep running. The outlaws would catch up soon, and if they weren't prepared, they wouldn't make it out alive. He made a snap decision. "We're stopping," he said firmly, pulling the reins of the horse to a halt. Aiyana was startled, but she trusted him. Colt dismounted quickly, his boots hitting the ground with a soft thud. He turned to face her, his expression unreadable. "Stay here. Don't move." Aiyana nodded, her heart racing. Colt drew his revolver, checking it quickly. He had known that this moment would come. He wasn't a man to run forever. He was a man who faced his enemies head-on. The outlaws were getting closer now, their horses thundering through the dry earth, and Colt could hear their shouts, their anger building with every passing second. It was now or never. Colt turned toward Aiyana one last time before stepping into the clearing, his revolver ready. He could feel the weight of the moment settling on his shoulders. He had been in gunfights before, but there was something different about this one. He wasn't just fighting for survival. He was fighting for justice. The outlaws appeared in the distance, their faces twisted with rage. Colt didn't flinch. He stood tall, his body rigid with focus. They had made a mistake thinking they could steal from the wrong Apache woman. They would soon learn that the wrong man was coming for them. The leader of the outlaws, a burly man with a scar running down his cheek, rode ahead, his hand on his gun. He sneered at Colt, his eyes filled with contempt. "You think you can stop us, old man?" the leader yelled. Colt's gaze didn't waver. "I don't think I can stop you," Colt said, his voice cold and calm. "I know I can." Without warning, the first shot rang out. Colt's revolver flashed in the morning light, and the outlaw leader fell from his horse, his gun slipping from his hand. The other outlaws scrambled to draw their weapons, but Colt was faster. One by one, he took them down with precision and speed, each shot echoing through the canyon. The outlaws were no match for him. Aiyana watched in awe as Colt moved with deadly grace, his every movement calculated and sure. She had never seen anything like it. But even as she watched, she knew this fight wasn't over. There were still more outlaws out there, and they wouldn't stop until they had their revenge. Colt paused for a moment, his eyes scanning the area. He knew this wasn't over yet. The leader was down, but there was still a sense of urgency in the air. The outlaws had underestimated him, but they wouldn't make that mistake again. Colt turned to Aiyana, his eyes filled with determination. "We need to keep moving," he said. Aiyana nodded, her heart racing, but there was something else in her chest now. Hope. Hope that with Colt by her side, she could finally find the justice she had been searching for all along. Together, they would fight to the end, and they would make sure the outlaws never harmed anyone again. The first light of dawn cast a golden glow over the rugged terrain, but the calm of the morning was deceptive. Colt McAllister and Aiyana rode swiftly through the canyon, the sound of hooves pounding against the earth, echoing in the quiet landscape. The air was still, but the tension between them was palpable. Colt's mind raced as he navigated the winding path ahead, his thoughts focused on the remaining outlaws and what lay ahead. Aiyana, still gripping his waist, was quieter now, her body pressed close against his. She had never been this close to a man like Colt before. He was no ordinary cowboy. He was a man of action, a man who fought for what was right. As they rode, she couldn't help but wonder what had brought him here, what made him risk everything to help her. She had known many warriors in her life, but none like him. Colt's eyes scanned the horizon, ever watchful. He knew that while they had taken down the leader, the rest of the outlaws were still out there, hunting them. They had only just begun. He needed to keep moving, to stay ahead of the danger. Every time the sound of hooves reached his ears, his instincts flared. He wasn't just protecting Aiyana now. He was protecting his own future, his own redemption. Colt had spent years trying to outrun the ghosts of his past, but he had learned one thing. You couldn't outrun justice. It always caught up with you, one way or another. And today, it was catching up with the men who thought they could take what didn't belong to them. The wind shifted, and Colt felt it, the first sign that they were being tracked. He slowed the horse to a trot, scanning the area. Aiyana noticed the change in his posture, the way his shoulders tensed. "What is it?" she asked, her voice soft but steady. "They're close," Colt replied, his voice low. "We have to move fast." The outlaws had been chasing them for hours, but Colt was always one step ahead. His mind was sharp, his moves calculated. He knew the land, knew how to lose a trail, and he wasn't about to let anyone catch them. But the closer they got to the river, the more difficult it became to stay hidden. The ground was soft, and the outlaws would soon pick up their trail. Colt stopped the horse again, turning to Aiyana. "We're not out of the woods yet. You stay here while I check the way ahead." Aiyana looked at him, her eyes fierce. "I can help," she said, her voice steady. Colt hesitated, but he knew better than to argue with a warrior like Aiyana. "All right," he said, "but stay close. Don't make a sound." They dismounted and moved through the trees, careful not to alert the outlaws. Colt's eyes darted back and forth, scanning the area for any sign of movement. Aiyana followed his lead, her movements silent and swift. They made their way toward the river, where they would cross to the other side. The outlaws would expect them to keep heading north, but Colt had a different plan. As they neared the riverbank, the sound of galloping hooves grew louder, signaling the outlaws were getting closer. Colt cursed under his breath. "We don't have much time," he said. Aiyana nodded, her expression unwavering. She was ready. With a single motion, Colt led the way into the river. The cold water surged around their legs as they made their way to the other side. The current was strong, but Colt and Aiyana moved quickly, their boots finding steady footing on the rocks below. They had made it halfway across when Colt heard a shout behind them. "There they are!" The outlaws had found their trail. Colt's heart raced, but he didn't hesitate. He turned to Aiyana, his voice sharp. "Go? I'll hold them off." Aiyana looked at him, her eyes filled with determination. "No, we fight together." She grabbed her knife, ready for the confrontation. Colt nodded, knowing she wasn't going to back down. They continued to move through the river, trying to keep their balance as the sound of the outlaws' horses grew louder. The fight was coming, and Colt knew it would be their last chance to end this. He had faced men like this before, outlaws who thought they could take whatever they wanted. But this time, they had made the mistake of crossing the wrong Apache woman. And by the time the sun reached its zenith, they would realize the true cost of their actions. Colt's hand tightened around the handle of his revolver. He was ready. The water surged around Colt and Aiyana as they moved swiftly toward the opposite bank of the river. The outlaws were close now, their horses thundering in pursuit, their shouts echoing across the canyon. Colt's mind raced. He had been in tight situations before, but this felt different. They were fighting not just for survival, but for justice. The moment they had been running from was now upon them. He turned to Aiyana, his voice low but firm. "Stay behind me," he said. Aiyana nodded, her eyes filled with resolve. She had been through too much to back down now. They had crossed too many miles, faced too many dangers to be taken down by a group of outlaws. The current was strong, pulling at their legs as they pushed forward. Colt could feel the weight of the revolver at his side, the cold steel a constant reminder of the battle that was to come. He knew they couldn't keep running forever. They had to stand their ground. As they reached the far side of the river, Colt turned, his eyes scanning the landscape. The outlaws were almost upon them. He could see them now, their faces twisted with rage, their guns drawn and ready. Colt knew that there was no way out, no more running. This was it. Aiyana stepped forward, her hand steady on the knife at her side. "We fight together," she said, her voice unwavering. Colt nodded, the weight of the moment settling over him. He wasn't just fighting for himself anymore. He was fighting for her people, for the justice that had been long denied. The first outlaw broke through the trees, his horse charging toward them. Colt drew his revolver in a flash, his shot ringing out in the stillness of the morning. The outlaw fell from his horse, his gun skittering across the ground. Colt didn't pause to watch. He was already moving, his eyes locked on the next target. The outlaws charged in, but Colt and Aiyana were ready. Colt's revolver flashed again, and another outlaw went down. Aiyana, fierce and unyielding, moved with the precision of a warrior, her knife flashing as she took down one of the men who had gotten too close. The fight was chaotic, the sound of gunfire and screams filling the air. Colt's heart pounded in his chest as he moved through the fray, his eyes scanning for any threat. He couldn't let his guard down, not for a second. The outlaws were relentless, but Colt's skill with a gun was unmatched. He took down man after man, his movements fluid and precise, each shot finding its mark. Aiyana fought with a grace and power that took Colt by surprise. She was no helpless woman. She was a warrior in every sense of the word. Together, they were unstoppable. The outlaws had underestimated them, thinking that the two of them would be easy prey. But they were wrong. They had crossed the wrong people. The battle raged on, but it was clear now who would emerge victorious. Colt's gunfire was constant, his accuracy never wavering. The remaining outlaws hesitated, their confidence shaken by the strength and skill of Colt and Aiyana. One by one, they began to retreat, realizing they were outmatched. The last outlaw stood, his gun aimed at Colt, but his hand shook with fear. Colt's eyes locked onto his target, his fingers steady on the trigger. The man hesitated for a moment, and that was all it took. Colt fired. The outlaw dropped to the ground, his gun falling from his hand. Colt stood there, his breath steady, his gun still drawn, but the fight was over. The silence that followed was deafening. The only sound was the river, still rushing by, as if nothing had changed. Colt turned to Aiyana, his expression unreadable. She stood, covered in dirt and blood, but unbroken. Her eyes met his, and for the first time since their journey had begun, she smiled. It was a smile of relief, of triumph, but also of something more, something that Colt couldn't quite place. "It's over," she said, her voice soft. Colt nodded, but his thoughts were already racing. This battle was won, but there was still work to be done. The outlaws were gone, but their leader's absence was not the end of the story. Colt could feel it in his bones. There were more dangers ahead, but for the first time, he wasn't afraid. With Aiyana by his side, he knew they could face anything. He holstered his revolver, his gaze lingering on the bloodied ground, before turning to Aiyana once more. "We ride out at dawn," he said, his voice steady. Aiyana nodded. "Together," she replied, her words a promise. They had faced the storm, and they had come out victorious. Now, they would ride into the future, together. The morning sun was rising slowly over the mountains as Colt and Aiyana prepared to move again. The battle had been fierce, but now, with the outlaws either dead or retreating, they were finally given a brief moment of peace. Colt stood silently, staring out over the canyon, his mind racing with thoughts of what lay ahead. Aiyana was beside him, her eyes scanning the landscape. She could see the quiet resolve in his posture, the weight of responsibility that seemed to follow him wherever he went. She had seen it in the way he fought, in the way he led them through the chaos. Colt was not just a man of action. He was a man driven by something deeper, something more personal. Aiyana had seen that same fire in her people's eyes, the same unyielding desire for justice. Colt turned toward her, breaking the silence. "We're not done yet," he said, his voice low but firm. "The leader of those outlaws is still out there. We need to finish this." Aiyana nodded, her heart heavy with the knowledge of what had to come next. She had been running from the pain of her past, but now, standing side by side with Colt, she knew it was time to face it. "You're right," she said quietly. "But it's not just about him. It's about everything he represents." Colt looked at her, understanding the weight of her words. "I know," he said, "but we can't stop now. Not when we're this close." Aiyana agreed, but she could feel the burden of the journey pressing down on her. The fight they had just won was only one battle in a much larger war. She had seen it in the eyes of the men they fought. They were pawns in a game much bigger than any one person. The land, the people, the power. These were the things that truly mattered, and the men who sought to control them would stop at nothing. Aiyana's thoughts were interrupted by the sound of movement behind them. Colt's hand went to his revolver, but it was only one of the horses, restless and ready to go. Still, they both knew that every sound could be a warning. They were on edge, knowing that the outlaws could strike at any moment. Aiyana turned toward the horse, her eyes narrowed. "We need to keep moving," she said. "The more time we waste, the closer they get." Colt nodded. Agreed. He quickly mounted his horse, and Aiyana followed, her movements fluid and practiced. They rode in silence, the only sounds being the rhythmic pounding of hooves against the dirt and the distant call of birds in the morning light. The path ahead was winding and treacherous, but it was a path they had to follow. As they rode, Colt's mind returned to the fight they had just faced. He had been in many battles, but there was something different about this one. The stakes were higher. The outlaws they fought were not just criminals. They were part of a larger network, a system that sought to exploit the land and its people. And Colt knew that if they didn't stop the leader, more innocent lives would be lost. Aiyana, too, felt the weight of the situation. She had seen the darkness that had come with the expansion of the frontier, the way the land had been torn apart for the sake of power. She had lived through it, felt the loss of her people, the destruction of her home. But now, with Colt by her side, she saw a glimmer of hope. They could change things. They could fight back. The journey ahead was still long, and there would be more obstacles to face, but Aiyana was ready. She had found her strength again, and with Colt's guidance, she would not stop until justice was done. As they reached a small clearing, Colt pulled his horse to a stop. Aiyana followed suit, her eyes scanning the horizon. They had reached the edge of the land they had been crossing. Beyond it lay the leader of the outlaws, the one who had orchestrated everything. Colt knew that this was the moment. They could no longer run. They could no longer hide. They had to face him head on. "This is it," Colt said, his voice steady. "We take him down now, or we risk losing everything." Aiyana looked at him, her heart pounding in her chest. She had been through too much to back down now. She had seen the horrors of the world, but she had also seen the strength that lived within her. Together, they would make sure that justice was served. She nodded, determination in her eyes. "Let's finish this," she said. Colt didn't hesitate. He spurred his horse forward, Aiyana close behind. The final confrontation was coming, and they were ready. The land stretched out before Colt and Aiyana as they rode toward the outlaw camp. The sun was setting, casting long shadows across the barren plains. The air was thick, with tension, and Colt could feel the weight of the coming confrontation in his bones. He had fought countless battles, but this one was different. This was personal. The man they were about to face was not just another outlaw. He was the one who had caused so much pain and destruction. He had taken so much from Aiyana and her people, and now, Colt was going to make sure that he would pay for it. Aiyana rode silently beside him, her eyes focused ahead. She had seen what Colt was capable of, but she also knew that this would be the moment that determined everything. They had come too far to fail now. The camp came into view, a dark silhouette against the fading light. Colt's hand moved instinctively to his revolver, his fingers brushing the cold steel. He was ready. Aiyana looked at him, her expression unwavering. She didn't speak, but the determination in her eyes was enough. They were in this together, and nothing would stop them from seeing it through. Colt slowed his horse as they approached the outskirts of the camp. The sound of voices drifted on the wind, but it was the smell that struck Colt first, the smell of gunpowder and sweat, a telltale sign that they weren't alone. He motioned for Aiyana to stay close as they dismounted, moving silently toward the camp. The outlaws were gathered around a fire, laughing and drinking. They had no idea what was coming. Colt and Aiyana moved like shadows, their every step measured, their every movement precise. Colt's mind was clear, focused on the task at hand. He knew this would be a fight to the death. As they neared the fire, Colt could see the leader of the outlaws, his face hard and unforgiving, his eyes cold and calculating. This was the man who had caused so much destruction, and now he would pay the price. Colt's hand tightened around his revolver, but before he could make a move, the leader turned and spotted them. His eyes narrowed, a sneer forming on his lips. Well, the outlaw leader said, his voice dripping with sarcasm. "The mighty Gunslinger and the Apache warrior. I should have known you'd come for me." Colt's eyes never left the man, his voice calm but filled with authority. "This ends tonight." The outlaw leader laughed, the sound grating and cruel. "You think you can stop me? I've taken everything from you, and now I'll take your life, too." Colt didn't flinch. He didn't need to. He knew exactly what to do. The outlaw leader drew his gun, but Colt was faster. In a single motion, he drew his revolver and fired, the shot echoing through the camp. The leader stumbled back, his hand clutching his chest. He looked at Colt, disbelief in his eyes, before collapsing to the ground. The camp erupted into chaos. The other outlaws scrambled for their weapons, but they were too slow. Colt's revolver flashed again and again, each shot finding its mark with deadly precision. Aiyana moved with the same grace and skill, her knife flashing in the firelight as she took down one outlaw after another. The outlaws who had once been so confident, so sure of their victory, were now scrambling for their lives. But it was too late. The fight was already over. When the dust finally settled, Colt stood in the center of the camp, his revolver still smoking in his hand. Aiyana stood beside him, her face unreadable, but there was a sense of satisfaction in her eyes. They had done it. The leader was dead, and his men were either dead or fleeing into the night. Colt turned to Aiyana. his expression softening for the first time since the battle had started. "It's over," he said quietly. Aiyana nodded, her breath coming in steady gasps. "It is," she said. But Colt knew that it wasn't truly over. There would always be more battles, more injustices to fight. But for now, they had won. They had brought justice to those who had been wronged. And in that moment, as the fire crackled behind them and the last of the outlaws fled into the night, Colt knew that he had found something he hadn't realized he was searching for: peace. The world would always be filled with violence and chaos, but there were moments like this, moments when justice prevailed, when the right thing was done. And that, Colt thought, was enough. For now it was enough. The camp was quiet now, the fire burning low as the last of the outlaws fled into the wilderness. Colt McAllister and Aiyana stood side by side, the weight of the battle finally lifting from their shoulders. The smell of gunpowder lingered in the air, but the silence that followed felt almost peaceful. Aiyana took a deep breath, her eyes scanning the darkened landscape. She could feel the presence of Colt beside her, a man who had proven himself in the heat of battle, a man who had fought for what was right. But she also felt something else, something she hadn't expected, a sense of finality. It was over. The leader of the outlaws was dead, and the remaining men had scattered like the cowards they were. For the first time in a long while, Aiyana felt a flicker of hope. Justice had been served, but there was still much to be done. The battle was won, but the war was far from over. Colt turned toward her, his voice calm and steady. "It's done," he said, his eyes meeting hers. Aiyana nodded, her heart still racing from the intensity of the fight. "For now," she replied, her voice soft. Colt didn't argue. He knew better than anyone that peace was fleeting in a world like this. He had lived through it, seen the way things could change in an instant. But for now, they had time. Time to breathe, to regroup, and to prepare for whatever came next. They had won the battle, but the road ahead was still uncertain. As the last embers of the fire flickered, Colt moved toward the horses, his hand brushing against the leather of the saddle. "We'll leave at first light," he said, his voice steady. Aiyana didn't need to ask where they were headed. She knew that their journey was far from over. They would keep moving, keep fighting for what was right. The land was vast, and there were still those who would do anything to take it. But with Colt by her side, Aiyana felt a renewed sense of purpose. She wasn't alone anymore. As they saddled their horses, Aiyana looked toward the horizon, the first hints of dawn beginning to break through the dark sky. The journey ahead was still long, but there was something different about it now. They had faced the darkness together, and now, they would face whatever came next. Colt was already moving, his eyes focused on the trail ahead. Aiyana followed his lead, her heart steady now, her mind clear. The world was a dangerous place, but she had learned one thing. With courage, with determination, and with the right people by your side, nothing was impossible. The outlaws were defeated, but the fight for justice would never end. The two of them rode off into the breaking dawn, the sound of their hooves the only thing that could be heard, steady and sure, as they disappeared into the vastness of the land. They had won today, but tomorrow would bring new challenges, new enemies, and new opportunities to stand for what was right. But Aiyana knew that no matter what came next, they would face it together. And that, she realized, was what truly made them unstoppable. As the first rays of sunlight bathed the land in a golden hue, Colt and Aiyana rode side by side, their horses' hooves steady on the dusty trail. The fight, the bloodshed, and the chaos were behind them now. The weight of the past few days had begun to settle, and in the quiet, there was a sense of peace between them, a peace forged by battle, by justice, and by shared purpose. The wind gently tugged at Aiyana's hair as she rode, her gaze steady on the horizon. They had crossed a line together, and now, they were moving towards something more uncertain, yet more promising than they had ever known. Colt glanced at her, noticing the calm in her eyes, a stark contrast to the fire he had witnessed earlier. She had always been strong, but now, she seemed even stronger. Her spirit had not only survived the battle, it had thrived in it. Aiyana turned to him, her voice breaking the silence. "Do you think it's over?" she asked. Colt met her gaze, his jaw set. "No, it's never truly over. But today, we took a step toward something better." They both knew that the land was full of dangers, of men who would stop at nothing to take what wasn't theirs, of forces that would never rest. but for the first time, they felt like they had the power to stand against it. The journey ahead would be long, filled with more enemies, more battles, but they knew they were ready. They were not just survivors now, they were warriors. The road ahead twisted and turned, leading them through forests, over hills, and into the wide-open plains. As they traveled, Colt couldn't help but reflect on the journey that had brought them here, the twists of fate, the bonds forged in, the heat of battle, and the unexpected ways they had become a team. In Aiyana, he had found a kindred spirit. She was no longer just a woman he had come to rescue. She was a partner, someone he trusted with his life. And in his heart, Colt knew that they would keep fighting together, no matter where the road took them. As they rode, Aiyana looked up at the sky, the vast expanse above them seeming to stretch forever. The land they had fought to protect was more than just land, it was home. And with every step they took, they were closer to ensuring that it remained free. Colt knew the journey would be hard, but he was no longer alone. With Aiyana by his side, they would face whatever came next. The wind picked up again, the sound of it rushing through the trees a constant reminder of the wild, untamed world they lived in. But for Colt and Aiyana, it was a reminder of their strength. The world had tried to break them both, but it had failed. And now, they would make sure it never succeeded. The horizon ahead was wide open, full of promise and challenge. It was the kind of journey that never truly ends, the kind of life that never stops testing you. But Colt and Aiyana had something that the world could never take away: their bond, their resolve, and their shared purpose. The land stretched out before them, vast and beautiful, but full of danger. There were still more battles to be fought, more injustices to right. But with each other's strength to rely on, Colt and Aiyana knew they would prevail. The sun was setting behind them, casting long shadows as they rode toward the future, side by side, ready for whatever it might bring. In the distance, the sound of their horses' hooves faded into the quiet of the land, a symbol of their journey, of two warriors, united by purpose, riding into the unknown with nothing but the open road ahead and the hope of a better tomorrow. Get ready to dive into an epic tale of justice, revenge, and courage in this thrilling Western story. Follow the journey of Colt McAllister and Aiyana, two unlikely allies who come together to face the brutal challenges of the American frontier. In this gripping Western story, Colt, a legendary gunslinger, and Aiyana, a fierce Apache woman, battle against ruthless outlaws who have caused devastation and loss. As they fight their way through danger, they form a bond that will carry them through countless trials. From intense shootouts to moments of quiet reflection, their journey will keep you hooked. This Western story explores the themes of resilience, honor, and the pursuit of justice in a world where the law is often out of reach. The landscape is vast, the enemies are relentless, but Colt and Aiyana have something that no one can take away: their unwavering will to fight for what is right. As they ride into the unknown, the stakes get higher, but their determination grows stronger. If you love a good Western story filled with action, drama, and heart, this one is sure to captivate you. The rugged wilderness, the sound of gunfire, and the spirit of the Wild West come alive in this unforgettable tale. As Colt and Aiyana face off against the forces of darkness, they teach us the true meaning of courage and justice. Their Western story is more than just a fight for survival. It's a fight to protect the land they love and the people they cherish. From the first shot to the final showdown, this Western story will keep you on the edge of your seat. So saddle up and join Colt and Aiyana on their wild ride through the unforgiving landscape of the American West. This is a Western story you won't want to miss.